As Emeka's casket was lowered into the ground, the weight of guilt passed down on Sarah, so heavy it seemed to crush her spirit. She knew what she had done, but to speak of it was unthinkable. In a small community in the heart of the tropical rainforest, love blossomed between Sarah and Aloy, two people from different tribes and backgrounds. Sarah came from a tribe known for being outsiders, but they had a deep sense of family loyalty. But to Aloy's people, her tribe bore a stigma that stretched back to generations. Rumors that they were descendants of slaves captured in wars long past. For the families of Aloy's tribe, it was disgraceful to marry anyone linked to such a history. Despite this, Aloy was captivated by Sarah's kindness, her thoughtfulness, and her calm spirit. He was a strong-willed trader, well respected for his strong business intelligence and determination for success. When he announced his intention to marry Sarah, his family was shocked. His mother wept, his brother scoffed, and his kinsmen pleaded with him. They warned him that marrying Sarah would mean disgrace, that his children would be shunned and labeled as outcasts. But Aloy would not be moved. His love for Sarah was unbreakable, and he refused to let ancient prejudices decide his future. And so, in defiance of his family's wishes, Aloy and Sarah wedded in a quiet, private ceremony with only a few friends and family as witnesses. Years passed and the couple was blessed with 3 children, 2 sons, Obinna and Emeka, and a daughter named Amara. Their home was a happy one filled with love, and Aloy worked tirelessly to grow his business, determined to give his family the best life possible. But there was a shadow that loomed over them, of coldness from Aloy's family. Whenever they visited his people, the relatives barely spoke to them, and the children noticed the scornful looks cast their way. Sarah tried her best to shield her children from this harsh reality, raising them to treat and respect their relatives regardless. She never spoke of the prejudice or told them why they were treated this way, hoping they would grow up free from the weight of the past. When Obinna, the eldest, turned 19, his father proudly sent him abroad to pursue his studies. Aloy's business had prospered over the years, allowing his son to have opportunities he himself could only dream of. In a new country with new people, Obinna felt a sense of freedom he had never known. Here, no one knew of his family's struggles or the stigma that followed his mother's lineage. As he settled into his studies, Obinna made friends with other young men from his homeland who shared his language and a sense of camaraderie. Among these friends was a young man named Kunde, who had a bright personality and quickly became one of Obinna's closest companions. They spent time studying, exploring the city, and talking late into the night about almost everything, with Obinna opening up about his family to Kunde because he believed they were friends. One day, Kunde approached Obinna with a request. He explained that his uncle wanted to send him some money, but his bank account was currently inactive due to some paperwork issues. Could you help me, Obinna? Kunde asked. If I have the money sent to your account, you know I'll share some of it with you for the trouble. It's quick and easy, I promise. Obinna hesitated, but saw it as a simple way to earn extra money. He didn't want to bother his parents for more funds and thought it would be harmless. Agreeing, he gave Kunde his account details. However, what he did not know was that Kunde and his friends were involved in a scheme of financial fraud and they had chosen Obinna as their unsuspecting scapegoat. They reasoned that if any trouble arose, it would fall on Obinna, who would appear to be the one handling the suspicious transactions. Within weeks, money began to pour into Obinna's account, more than he had ever expected. He was a bit taken aback, but Kunde brushed off his concerns, saying his uncle was simply generous and wanted to help Kunde and his friends. Then one evening, as Obinna was studying, he received a sudden call from his bank. They had informed him that his account had been flagged for suspicious transactions and that he was under investigation for financial fraud. Shocked and terrified, Obinna tried to explain that he had simply helped a friend and knew nothing about any illegal activities. But the authorities were unmoved. To them, he was the account holder and all evidences pointed to him. In his cell that night, Obinna was flooded with panic and regret. He thought of his parents, of how proud his father had been to send him abroad. He could not imagine the shame and disappointment they would feel when they found out. Back home, the news soon reached Aloy and Sarah. Aloy was devastated, unable to believe that his son, his pride and joy, could be involved in such a scandal. He struggled to raise funds to cover legal expenses, his once thriving business now strained under the weight of his son's predicament. As the truth of the situation came to light, Aloy's family saw this as a chance to cast blame on Sarah's lineage. This is what comes from mixing with people like her, they whispered amongst themselves. Her blood has brought shame upon us. Aloy's own mother, broken-hearted, confronted him, asking, "Now, do you see why we begged you not to marry her?" But Sarah stood by her son. She sold everything she could, even her precious family heirlooms, to help with Obina's defense. She knew that her children's struggles were born not of their own faults, but of the prejudice and judgment passed down through generations. In her desperation for solutions to the problems faced by her family, she turned to her friend Gladys, whom she had known for years. Gladys was a recently widowed woman who had been married twice before, and both times her husband died mysteriously. Gladys assured her that she was going to help her with Obina's problem. She told Sarah that she will take her to the Queen Mother who can turn the situation in her favor. Sarah at this point was too desperate to and needed help anywhere she could find. On the agreed date, they met on the outskirts of town from where they began their journey. Along the way, Gladys called a canoe driver and informed him of their imminent arrival close to the waterfront. Once there, it was already getting dark as the moon was starting to come out. They found the canoe driver ready and waiting. As they entered the canoe, the driver and the woman exchanged pleasantries and they departed. 2 hours into their journey on the sea, they suddenly arrived at a small island right in the middle of the sea and stopped abruptly with the canoe driver declaring, "We are here." Sarah gave her friend Gladys a worrying look as they disembarked from the canoe. They made their way into the island and walked to the only hut. The Queen Mother, whose skin seemed to glitter, was there with her female servants. She asked Gladys why she had come. Gladys, after offering eulogies to the Queen Mother, told her that her friend Sarah had some personal problems. Sarah proceeded to state her problems to the Queen Mother, who assured her that she was going to help her if she joined their society and became one of the Sisters of the Sea. The Queen Mother pointed to a clay cup and asked her to drink the content as a symbol of acceptance to join. Sarah looked at her friend, who gave her a collaborative nod, and she took the cup and drank the content. A couple of months passed, and news reached them that Obinna, who was facing 25 years imprisonment, was to be deported back home. His parents were overjoyed and were so happy that Obinna was going to avoid jail term. Aloy's business suddenly began to pick up again, and for a short while, everything looked to be going well for them. The once happy home of Sarah and Aloy had become shrouded in darkness, each tragedy carving deeper wounds into their hearts. After the ordeal with Obina's imprisonment and his subsequent release, Sarah had thought she had finally brought peace to her family. Sarah was summoned by the Queen Mother, who informed her that a sacrifice was required of her by the society for the release of her son. The sacrifice demanded of her by the Queen Mother had come at a devastating price: the life of her second son, Emeka. Sarah thought she could get the society to help her by joining, and when the time was right, she was going to sacrifice herself, but she was wrongly mistaken as the society did not accept the life of its members. Emeka, her second child, had become important to the family in the absence of Obinna. He became the only pillar of the family during the ordeal. He encouraged his mother, telling her to keep hope alive that everything would be okay. Sarah began to cry uncontrollably for days for the steep price she now had to pay for Obina's release. 2 months later, while on an errand for his father to deliver some products to a customer in the next town, Emeka was involved in a fatal car accident. Every other passenger survived with minor injuries except Emeka, who died on the spot. As Emeka's casket was lowered into the ground, the weight of guilt pressed down on Sarah. So heavy it seemed to crush her spirit. She knew what she had done, but to speak of it was unthinkable. How could she explain that in her desperation to save her family, she had made an unholy pact, one that demanded the very blood of her children? She bore the silent burden alone, but the people of the community were less forgiving. Whispers grew into open accusations. People turned away when she walked past, calling her cursed, a bearer of misfortune. Aloy, once her rock, became cold and distant, his spirit withering with each calamity. As the months passed, Aloy's health began to falter. Sarah, seeing him wasting away, ran once more to her friend Gladys, begging for help. She feared that she would lose Aloy if she did nothing. Together, they returned to the coast and summoned the Queen Mother again, pleading for mercy. But the Queen Mother was unmoved, her voice as cold and commanding as the sea. "The price for your son's release from prison must be paid in full," she said. "Another sacrifice is required." Sarah's heart was broken this time. They demanded her only daughter Amara, who was about to finish secondary school and dreamed of becoming a nurse. Sarah's tears fell like rain as she returned home, her mind twisted with sorrow. Her friend Gladys tried to reassure her, saying, "We all pay our price. You are doing what is necessary to protect your family." In despair, Sarah agreed once more, and weeks later, Amara fell mysteriously ill. She wasted away, her once bright spirit dimmed, until she too left this world. The pain was unbearable, yet Sarah bore it in silence, hoping her sacrifices would somehow bring peace. But instead, her choices drove a wedge deeper into her marriage. Aloy, shattered by the deaths of two of his children, grew suspicious of Sarah, influenced by his family who had long accused her of being a curse. The love that had once bound them together was now a fragile thread, fraying with each passing day. And then there was Obina, who had returned from prison a changed man. Incarceration had left its mark on him, and he had turned to drugs to numb the trauma. He was distant, hollow, often shut in his room, avoiding his mother. Sarah watched helplessly as her only remaining son spiraled into despair. The hope she had once nurtured was now slipping away. About a year later, just when Sarah thought she could endure no more, Queen Mother's call came again. It was her turn to make another choice. The society demanded one last sacrifice, either her only son Obinna or her husband Aloy. This time, she felt the full weight of her despair. She had already given up two children. How could she choose between the only child she had left and the man she had once loved more than life itself? Sarah returned to her friend Gladys, her face pale and haunted. "Must it be so?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "I have given them my children. Must I give them everything?" Gladys nodded solemnly. "The price for the Queen Mother's aid is never light. But remember, Sarah, you made this choice to protect your family. The spirits require balance." Overcome by sorrow, Sarah wrestled with the decision for days, her heart breaking anew each time she thought of her son and husband. She spent sleepless nights, pacing, praying, hoping for a miracle, but the Queen Mother's call was unyielding. Finally, with a heavy heart, Sarah chose. She could not bear to see her son die, and yet the thought of losing Aloy, who had become so distant and cold, felt like a betrayal. She knew in some way that this curse would only end if she herself faced her choices, but now the weight of her decisions felt impossible to escape. Soon after, Aloy fell gravely ill, his body weakening until, in a state of feverish delirium, he muttered accusations against Sarah, saying that she had brought ruin upon him and his children. His family seized upon his final words, convinced now that Sarah was the cause of the family's misfortunes. When Aloy passed away, his relatives refused to let her attend his burial, whispering that she was a witch who had sacrificed her family for her own survival. Alone and shunned, Sarah lived in the shadow of her own actions, haunted by the faces of her lost children and husband. Obinna, lost in a world of addiction, remained estranged from her, unable to forgive her for the choices she had made. The home that had once echoed with laughter now stood silent, a shell of the life she had once fought so hard to build. In time, the villagers told tales of Sarah, warning their children of the dangers of greed and desperation. They spoke of the woman who had sacrificed everything she loved, not understanding the chains of circumstance and choice that had bound her.